Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a new study that uncovers some of the hidden costs of our favorite online communities.
We all join online groups for that sense of connection, right? For that shared passion. But what if that community you absolutely love is secretly stressing you out? Well, some groundbreaking new research actually followed users for a full year to get to the bottom of the long-term effects of our online fan clubs. And the results are pretty surprising.
Okay, so first things first, let's get on the same page about what we're talking about. Researchers have a term for these groups, social media brand communities, or SMBCs for short. But really, all that means is those dedicated online spaces for fans of, well, everything. From the latest tech gadgets to super niche makeup brands, you name it.
So to really figure this out, a recent study did something pretty cool and kind of unique. They followed 805 social media users for a full year, a whole 12 months, just to understand the long-term psychological effects of actually being an active member in these communities.
So what is it that pulls us so deeply into these online worlds anyway? Well, it turns out it often starts with a really common and very human need.
The study found that for a lot of people, the whole journey begins with something they call social media escapism. And it's exactly what it sounds like. We use these platforms as a way to cope with daily pressures, to just switch off from all the real-life stress and dive into a world where we can feel a little more connected.
But here's where things start to get interesting, and maybe a little dark. The research shows that over time, the whole reason we're there, why and how we participate, can totally change. And yeah, not always for the better.
I mean, think about it. When you first join a group like this, it's all fun and exciting, right? You're discovering new stuff. You're meeting people who get it. But after months and months, that fun can kind of morph into an obligation. It starts to feel less like a hobby and more like a chore, There's this low-key pressure to keep up, to stay engaged, and God forbid you miss out on something.
So the study explains this process using something called a stressor-strain outcome model. The easiest way to think about it is like a series of dominoes, and the very first domino to fall, that's the stressor. This is the point where our continued participation stops being fun and actually becomes a source of chronic, low-level stress.
And that constant nagging pressure, it doesn't just stay online, it starts to create a really real sense of exhaustion that can totally follow us into our daily lives.
Okay, so what happens when that first domino, the stressor, falls? Well, it hits the next one. That stressor creates a strain on our mental resources. And this second domino has a name: social media fatigue. And listen, we're not just talking about feeling a little tired here. This is a deep mental exhaustion. It comes from that constant need to process all the information, manage the notifications, and interact with everyone in the community, day in and day out. It's a lot. So this burnout, it has a really direct consequence. It makes us way more likely to feel negative emotions when we're interacting online. All of a sudden, small disagreements feel like huge fights, and that community that used to be a safe haven, it starts to feel more like a source of frustration.
So you see the chain reaction, right? The stress leads to fatigue, the fatigue leads to frustration, and all of this has a final and pretty significant outcome on our overall well-being. And that brings us to the last domino in the chain, the outcome. All that sustained strain from the fatigue and the negative feelings, it directly impacts our mental health. It leads to what the study calls psychological ill-being, and we're talking measurable symptoms of anxiety and depression here.
This all raises a really, really important question. What's the real culprit? Is it just that we're seeing too much information, information overload, or is it something deeper, like the emotional exhaustion itself?
Okay, and this might just be the most surprising finding in the whole study. The data showed that information overload, just seeing too many posts, it had no significant direct link to feeling unwell mentally. But social media fatigue? Oh yeah. That had a huge, significant impact.
So, let's put it simply. It's not the flood of content that's the problem, it's the emotional and mental drain from feeling like you have to participate. That exhaustion, that's the key that unlocks the door to all those negative feelings and ultimately is what affects our mental health.
So understanding this chain reaction is actually really powerful. Because it doesn't just tell us what's going wrong, it also gives everyone, us, the brands, policymakers, a clear path forward to actually make things better.
For the companies and the managers running these communities, the takeaway is pretty clear. They need to start prioritizing their members' well-being over just constant engagement.
That means actively creating supportive environments and designing things in a way that reduces that risk of social media fatigue we've been talking about.
And it's not just on the companies. Governments and public institutions can play a huge role too. Think about it. Public awareness campaigns about healthy social media use, integrating digital literacy into school curricula. These things can help equip all of us, especially young people, with the tools we need to engage in a healthier way.
And finally, what about us? What can we do? Well, a lot of the power is actually in our hands. It's about being more mindful. It means moderating our time, maybe using one of those apps to track it. It means balancing our online life with actual offline activities. And most importantly, learning to recognize the signs of fatigue in ourselves before it really takes a toll.
So, let's just recap that domino effect one more time, because it's so important. Sustained participation leads to social media fatigue. That fatigue triggers negative emotions, and those emotions ultimately result in psychological ill-being. It's a clear, predictable, and pretty scary chain reaction.
And that leaves us with one final crucial question. Let's be real, our online communities aren't going anywhere. They're a huge part of modern life. So, knowing what we know now, how can we consciously build and take part in digital spaces that actually support and enrich us, instead of slowly draining us? Because being aware of this dark side, well, that's the first and most important step.